but it might gather, it's not tangential to what Brian was saying. He's describing Leland's life and character and so forth, so that's where this comes from. Okay, so I'm her youngest son, so I didn't know her as long as some other people, including Eiléan and so forth. But anyway, but no spring chicken either. So, me. So, let's crack on. That's a short thing I have ready. So, I grew up in Leland's flats and houses. Leland was legendary in her generosity regarding letting people stay over, sometimes for longish periods, as she herself had done as a guest elsewhere in her earlier years before I was born. In Lower Leeson Street, there was the infamous horse box in her flat, which was in fact a spare room, which as a baby I treated as off limits. Dark, always dark, and spooky, with its strange metallic bed habitually stripped, bearing a lattice of rusty danger to baby fingers. We usually knew who was staying in the sense that introductions were made, but occasionally you would just toddle in. I was actually a toddler at this point, and a complete stranger would be lying in the sitting room, overspilled from the horse box and elsewhere. Leland would later explain this was such and such the musician, poet, or painter, or somebody's friend. The ones I still remember are Michael Colbert, who tended to bring treats for children. That's probably why I remember him. Robert McBride, Pierce Hutchinson, McDarrell Woods, and visits from two of the Dubliners who are indistinguishable as bears to me, except for Red Luke Kelly. When we moved around the corner to number 1 Hatch Place, I became aware of the concept of lodgers. Now there were 2 rooms given over and not to be invaded to paying guests, to help pay the rent. In them were exotic adults. They were nearly all artistic, from lowly buskers to students of literature and film to filmmakers and surrealist painters. Leland tried to make sure everyone, including us 3 kids, had our own spaces, even though the house was tiny. On top of this situation, there were fairly regular after-hours drinks parties, plus Fintan McLachlan's friends and associates, some of whom were from the criminal fraternity. What this meant to a young child was that you had to develop a bullshit detector. I and my brothers soon had a built-in radar whose spectrum went from possibly gift-bearing over here to nasty, and sometimes over there to psycho approach. And the vertical axis was the sober to drunk. I think that turned out very well for us in our own development as balanced, normal people. In some cases, this busy marketplace of personalities inside the house really fed into my trajectory as a composer. The surrealist painter Tony Walsh was a long-staying guest. I wormed my way into his world, and there evolved many mind-expanding conversations on art, with illustrations from his books, science, and politics. I learned how to question everything in this general milieu, not just from Tony, of course, but Tony happened to introduce me to John Cage and Karl-Heinz Stockhausen at a very early age. Although Leland sometimes spaced herself outside the house, she managed by some quite extraordinary dedication to get us up and onto bicycles, out to school, fed, and feeling perfectly secure and loved throughout our childhoods. She even taught us not to interrupt her at the typewriter without coercion or menaces. In incidental, accidental, and deliberate ways, she was a model parent, if you can imagine a model like no other.